All right, so we all think we know the story of Nevermore, right? That magical island, endless adventure, eternal youth, the whole deal. But what if that was all just a really, really clever lie? The material we're digging into today paints a much darker picture. It turns that childhood paradise into something, well, something truly sinister. We're talking about a spectral prison, one built on what's called alchemical damnation. So this whole explainer really boils down to one pretty chilling question. What if that thing we all kind of wish for, never growing old, wasn't a gift? What if it was the ultimate curse, the biggest trap of all? That's the core idea we're going to be unpacking here. Okay, so let's break it down. On the one hand, you've got the dream, the story we all know, endless adventure, staying young forever, total freedom. But the reality, wow. The reality in these texts is a complete, horrifying flip side. Endless adventure? Nope. Try alchemical stagnation. Eternal youth? It's more like being a biological shell, totally empty, no soul. And that absolute freedom? Turns out it's actually a meticulously built spectral prison. So if we want to understand this prison, we've got to start with how it was even built in the first place. Let's dive into the architecture of this stagnation, the blueprint for what these sources actually call the Isle of Misery and Madness. Yeah, so forget everything you picture about lush, wild jungles. That's not this Nevermore. This place is described as a cold, crystalline perfection. Think sterile, artificial. A world that was deliberately designed to be the exact opposite of a living, breathing, natural place. It's a total, calculated rejection of what life is supposed to be. Warm and messy and always evolving. So you're probably asking, how on earth do they pull that off? Well, here are the mechanics. The whole realm is basically anchored by this super powerful artifact called the Chronos Stone. It's a piece of forbidden alchemy, and it was provided by this architect of misery named Samyaza. And the result? It's no sunny paradise, I can tell you that. It's a land that is just stuck, permanently frozen in eternal twilight and decay. So time doesn't just stop here, it rots. And that right there, that really gets to the core philosophy of this whole place. Nevermore's entire identity is built on rejecting what the sources call the warm, messy evolution of life, of grace. It's basically a giant monument dedicated to saying no. No to growth, no to change, and ultimately, no to life itself.
Okay, so we've got the prison itself. But what about the prisoners? Let's shift gears now and look at the horrifying alchemical process that's used to literally manufacture the soulless inhabitants of Nevermore.
Now, the term they use for the Lost Boys is homunculus, and you really got to let that sink in. This is so important. They aren't just kids who don't get older. They're artificial beings, biological shells that have been systematically stripped of everything that makes a person human. We're talking their history, their ability to suffer, and in the end, their very soul. And it's not random. It's a process, a clear 4-step process. First step, you've got the pact. Your classic deal with the devil kind of thing. Next, you have to surrender what are called the shackles of sentiment and memory. Then comes the really nasty part, the alchemical reduction, where your entire history and all your suffering just gets scoured away. And the results of all this? You become one of the hollow echoes. Basically, a puppet in this huge, horrific experiment. So, what powers all this dark magic? If you're wondering, the answer is, it's pure atrocity. Take the ability to fly, that ultimate symbol of freedom in the story. It's achieved using something called a Faustian unguent, and its main ingredient? You might want to sit down for this. It's rendered from the fat of unbaptized infants. I'm not kidding. The whole system is completely parasitic, just fueled by the most unthinkable things imaginable. Which, of course, brings us to the big question, why? Why would anyone build a place like this? And the answer is, it's not just about being cruel. This whole setup is a stage. It's the setting for what the source material calls a devil's legal victory, a kind of philosophical argument being played out for real. So, okay, if this whole thing is just one big, twisted experiment, who's running the lab? Who are the scientists in the white coats, observing this nihilism of the nursery? The answer is this group they call the Unholy Trinity. First, there's Peter. He's the predator, the one who lures everyone in. Then you have Samyaza, the architect. He's the one who literally built the prison. And finally, you have Iblis. He's the philosopher, the Prince of Ice, and he's the one who provides the chilling why behind the whole thing.
And here's the absolute key takeaway. Nevermore exists to prove a point. It's nothing more than the stage for a cosmic wager, a bet, orchestrated by this trinity. The entire place was designed from the ground up for one purpose, to prove just how weak the human soul is, to show how it fails when it's faced with one very specific choice.
And this is the point. This is Iblis's grand argument. He claims that when people willingly choose this so-called beautiful death, this perfect, static, never-changing youth, they prove him right. It proves that deep down, we'd rather be frozen monuments in some sterile museum than go through the pain and struggle of actually being alive, of evolving and growing as children of the divine. So for him, every single soul that takes the deal, it's a win. It's a legal victory for his side.
But what's it like for someone who's trapped inside but who actually gets it? Someone who understands the truth? Well, in our final section, we're going to look at the testimony of the one damned soul who sees this prison for exactly what it is.
And that person is Captain Hook. But forget the goofy pirate from the cartoons. This version of Hook is an entirely different character. He's a tragic figure, described as a damned scholar akin to Dr. Faustus. He's not the bad guy here. He's the one prisoner who's held on to enough of himself to actually understand the full, crushing horror of where he is. See, his real damnation isn't a ticking crocodile. It's immortality itself. He is denied the one thing he wants more than anything, the sweet, final oblivion of the grave. He can't have an ending. And because of that, his entire existence has no meaning. And this really captures his tragic realization. When you refuse to die, you just end up trapped in a senseless void. But to truly live, well, that requires the possibility of it ending, of closure. He gets it. Without an end, there are no stakes. There's no meaning, there's no story to tell. So, to wrap this all up, this version of Nevermore is basically a technological fall. It's like a perfect digital eternity. It's a world with zero consequences. But the only reason no one ever bleeds, the reason no one ever suffers, is because no one there is actually real anymore. And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. You know, in our own world, with our own constant quest to get rid of risk and pain and consequences, are we actually building a paradise? Or could it be, as this dark take on Nevermore suggests, that we're just building a more comfortable, and maybe because of that, a much more insidious form of damnation?